What's up guys, Starlink here, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Watch, a series where I take a look at indie games both old and new that catch my interest. And in this episode, we're taking a look at a new Metroidvania game titled Record of the Lodess War, Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth. And God, what a title that is, right? Try to say that 5 times fast. Now, I don't know anything about Record of the Lodess War as a series other than that it spawned a game on the Dreamcast many years ago and that it's a very old anime. Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth happens to be a Metroidvania, however, so of course I had to go check it out. It launched on Steam to early access last year, and it recently received a new update adding new content, so I figured now was a good time to jump in and give it a shot. You play as Deedlit, a high elf who I'm assuming to be a popular character within the anime series. She awakens within some unknown labyrinth and sets off exploring to find out what's going on. Now, as far as the story goes, that's it. There really isn't much else to go on other than that. There is some interaction between other characters found within the labyrinth, but the story is hard to follow along with for newcomers. It pretty much expects you to be a veteran of the series to know anything about these characters and what exactly is going on. But like I said, this is in Steam Early Access, and that means that it is not fully complete yet, and that it includes the story. Hopefully, with the game's full release, we can get some kind of backstory to follow up so newcomers like myself won't be so confused and can get a better grasp of who these characters are, because as it stands right now, there isn't much to go by. But I digress. When it comes to Metroidvania games, the story usually takes a backseat to the actual gameplay anyway, and Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth truly shines here. It shares a lot in common with Castlevania's Symphony of the Night, right down to how your character traverses the environment, but there are some key differences that set it apart. One thing of note here is what it shares in common with some bullet hell shooters. Deedlit, being a high elf, has a great appreciation towards nature and a high affinity with spirits and magic. You come across these two spirits in the beginning of the game that represent fire and wind that you can switch between on the fly. When you switch spirits, it changes your elemental properties. Now, this is crucial not only to damage certain enemies who may be immune or weak to a given element versus the other, but it also allows you to pass through barriers and attacks unharmed. This is where those bullet hell shooter elements I mentioned come into play, and the end result is actually very rewarding and adds a layer of strategy to the game, in particular with boss fights. When you attack with one spirit, you power up the other to a max level of 3, increasing each spirit's strength, thereby also increasing your damage output. While at max level, any lost health is also restored gradually. Each time you're hit, however, it goes down a level until you power it up again, encouraging you to stay on your toes and not get hit. Now, during normal encounters with enemies, it can be fairly easy to maintain a max spirit level, but the same can't always be said with boss fights, which can be challenging if you don't come in prepared. These boss fights are the best part of the game, however, and actively encourage you to switch between spirits during the fight to avoid damage as best as you can, because if you don't, you won't last long. Other than the switching spirits mechanic, everything else is pretty similar to your standard Metroidvania experience. You have an interconnected map to explore as you level up, with plenty of weapons to collect and secret rooms to discover, areas gating your progress until you have the required item or ability to proceed, warp rooms, the works. You also have 2 weapon categories that can be equipped at once, with your primary hand consisting of swords, spears, boomerangs and such, and your secondary weapon, which consists of bows and arrows that can bounce off metallic walls, solving puzzles that utilize your MP to fire. Speaking of MP, Deedlit can also cast a variety of spells at the press of the ability button. This same button is also shared with your consumable items like potions, and you can switch between them by holding it down. It works as is, although I wish that there was an option to access your items and use them within the pause menu as well. That would have come in handy and leave the quick menu less cluttered with switching abilities. I should note that I enjoy this game's use of puzzle rooms, which usually consist of gears you have to hit with your arrows to progress. They are fun little challenges to solve and an interesting way to traverse the environment. Other weapons don't affect the gear at all when you hit it though, which is kind of odd, but not a big deal. Another thing I like is your character's ability to attack in all 8 directions, allowing you to hit enemies sitting just out of reach. Also, attacking downwards slows your descent, and depending on whether you have a 2-handed sword equipped, You can even continuously bounce off of enemies a la DuckTales or Shovel Knight style, which is a nice added touch. One thing that I noticed with the boomerang weapon that I thought was kind of odd is that you can only hit a single enemy at a time. This means that if the boomerang happens to pass through multiple enemies at once, it's only going to damage the first thing it hits. It's not such a big deal really, since the boomerang is already overpowered as is, but it's just weird when you consider other weapons like a greatsword for example don't suffer from this problem. Another little minor gripe I have is with the map layout. Every room is pretty much stuck together with next to zero gaps in between, creating a cluttered mess that can make it difficult to pinpoint where certain areas are. Again, it's not a huge deal, but I think things would be better if there was more empty space in between rooms on the map itself, making it easier to navigate, but that's just me. I'm really digging the art style here, which clearly takes its inspiration from Symphony of the Night. Deedlit straight up looks and moves like a female version of Alucard with improved animations, which I'm not complaining one bit about. The environments you come across are colorful, well detailed and varied, which makes exploring a joy. I also like the very subtle cracks present on breakable walls, as it makes it easier to pinpoint finding secret areas. Creature designs look great and boss fights are huge and menacing, so no complaints there. I wish there was a bestiary of some kind within the game however, but that's not a huge deal considering there isn't much in the way of enemy drops other than the occasional weapon anyway. Still, it would be nice to have one nonetheless. The music was alright and fits the theme, but there wasn't really anything in particular that stood out to me. I do love the very subtle yet satisfying dice animation that plays when you first enter a new area though. As someone who enjoys a good board game every now and then, it's a nice touch. Overall, I enjoyed my time playing Record of the Lodess War, Deedlit, and Wonder Labyrinth. It took me a little over 3 hours to complete in its current state, and the game is not even finished yet with still more to come. It's currently in development by Team Ladybug as a Steam Early Access title, and is set for a spring release later this year. No word on a console release yet, but I'm sure it'll make its way there considering Touhou Luna Nights, another game by Team Ladybug, was released on other platforms. If you love Symphony of the Night mixed with bullet hell shooter elements, then you should definitely give this game a look. So I really enjoyed playing through this game and I'm looking forward to its final release sometime later this year. But if there's one little thing that bugged me just a little bit though, it's the fact that there's not really much in the way of a loot system present here. Now you'll still get an occasional weapon drop from an enemy here or there, but that's it. And there's really only 2 item categories you can equip things anyways. You have your main weapons category and your bows and arrows. There's no armor, accessories, or other item drops from enemies. And that's sad. Now it's not a huge deal of course, but it's kind of something I come to expect when I play games like this. I love to collect 100% item drops from enemies. It's like collecting that final slice of cake from a rotting zombie. It's not necessary of course, but it sure as hell is satisfying after you've been spent farming it for hours. But I digress. It's still a great game and I recommend playing it if you're into Metroidvania games. But anyways guys, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, or dislike if you didn't. And as always, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Reach for the stars.